In 1986, Castlevania took players inside Dracula's sprawling, horrifying mansion, and gamers never looked back. Now, over 3 decades later, Castlevania isn't just a major video game series, it's also an animated series, a series of comic books, and the origin of an entire video game genre. And just like Vlad's Castle, Castlevania is full of secrets. There's much more to the game than whips and vampires. Mysterious origins. Over 30 official Castlevania games have been published, and a few are even considered to be some of the greatest games of all time. So there's no doubt that Castlevania is an important franchise. And yet, historians have no clue who actually created the thing. Koji Igarashi, Castlevania's longtime producer and the name most commonly associated with the franchise, didn't start working on the series until 1997's Symphony of the Night. Castlevania doesn't have a real credit sequence, ending with a tribute to people like Christopher B. and Boris Karloffis. Why don't we know who made this game? In the 1980s and early 90s, Japanese game developers used pseudonyms at the behest of their bosses in order to make it harder for rival companies to poach talented staff members. Some historians have tried to track down Castlevania's creator, but haven't gotten much further than the name, Hitoshi Akamatsu. But other than a handful of credits on other Konami games, nobody seems to know much about him. From the looks of things, Mr. Akamatsu exited the game industry in the 90s and disappeared, if he ever existed at all. Beyond Nintendo. The first 3 numbered Castlevania games launched on the Nintendo Entertainment System, leading to the impression that the series started as an NES-exclusive franchise, except it didn't. Only a month after the first game debuted, the second entry in the series, Vampire Killer, arrived on Microsoft's MSX computer as a Japan exclusive, and Nintendo also ran Castlevania in some of their Versus System arcade cabinets. There's also Haunted Castle, Castlevania's first original arcade outing, which is regarded as a pretty terrible, incredibly difficult game with awful controls. Even worse, Simon Belmont only has 1 life and you can only continue 3 times, no matter how many quarters you pump into the machine. It wasn't long before the Belmonts and friends broke out into every system out there. But even early on, Nintendo wasn't the franchise-exclusive distributor. Bram Stoker's Dracula. It's pretty obvious that Castlevania owes quite a bit to Bram Stoker's vampire magnum opus. But just how much? Konami made Stoker's book part of the official timeline in Castlevania Bloodlines. According to Konami, the book's Quincy Morris, who helps Jonathan Harker kill Dracula before succumbing to his vampire-induced wounds, is actually a member of the Belmont line. In the game series, Quincy dispatched Dracula and went on to father Bloodlines hero John Morris. Jonathan from Castlevania Portrait of Ruin is Quincy's grandson. It's not a perfect fit, however. According to Bloodlines, John saw Quincy murder Dracula when he was a kid and without Harker's help. As a storytelling device, linking Stoker and Castlevania raises more questions than it answers. As a tribute to Castlevania's primary inspiration, however, it works just fine. Alucard's origins. One of the most popular characters in Castlevania is Alucard, Dracula's half-vampire son and the hero of Castlevania's Symphony of the Night, a noble and fierce warrior who's put his dad back in the ground and saved humanity multiple times. While everything about his backstory reeks of classic video games, Alucard, like his old man, is actually lifted from older source material. While not as well known as 1931's Dracula, the film's second sequel, 1943's Son of Dracula, is actually responsible for Alucard. In the film, horror star Lon Chaney Jr. plays the mysterious Count Alucard, who seduces a young heiress with promises of immortality. Of course, Alucard is just Dracula spelled backwards, so even though 1943 wasn't great at being subtle, the name stuck. Animated Adventures. Netflix Castlevania is the first video game to film adaptation to earn a fresh score on Rotten Tomatoes, with a rating of 90%. But it's not even the first Castlevania-themed cartoon. In 1989, Deke Entertainment produced a Saturday morning cartoon called Captain N, the Game Master, and characters from Castlevania played a major role. Captain N tells the story of a teenager named Kevin Keene who gets sucked into his Nintendo and faces off against villains from various 8-bit video games, including deranged versions of Punch-Out's King Hippo and Metroid's Mother Brain. Along the way, Kevin gets help from Mega Man, Kid Icarus, a sentient Game Boy, and Castlevania's first leading man, Simon Belmont.
And I'm Simon Belmont, vampire hunter at your service.
In Captain N, Simon is a vain adventurer who cares more about his dashing good looks than fighting evil, which is a pretty unfaithful adaptation as far as cartoons go. Dracula shows up as a reoccurring villain, and Alucard shows up in the 3rd season episode, Return to Castlevania, as a wisecracking teenager with sunglasses, a bat-shaped skateboard, and an unhealthy obsession with rock and roll.
Yo, Pops! Check out my new bat flip!
It was pretty much the most cringeworthy early 90s thing ever, and thankfully that version of Alucard quickly disappeared and never returned.
Oh, All right! Vampires rule!
Timelines. You don't make almost 20 games in 10 years without making a few mistakes, but there's one decision in particular that Koji Igarashi wishes that he could take back. While developing Symphony of the Night, Igarashi developed a series timeline for the developers to use as an internal reference. Once it leaked to a gaming magazine, Castlevania team decided to make it official. According to the timeline, Dracula returns every 100 years, but unfortunately, the official timeline is so thorough that Igarashi said that it hurt his creative process down the line, explaining, "Since Dracula only appears every 100 years, we made the whole timeline and ran out of places to put in another game." Of course, when continuity gets too crowded, you can just throw it all out and start over. And that's what Konami did in 2010, when it handed a new developer the reins to Castlevania Lords of Shadow, which takes place in an entirely different universe. But that game almost didn't happen at all. Metal Gear Shadow. In the late 2000s, Konami enlisted Mercury Steam to create a brand new 3D reboot of the Castlevania franchise. The developers put together a prototype and showed it to Konami's executives, but they grew nervous about all the changes that were being made to their classic franchise. So they stripped away the Castlevania branding and allowed development to continue. Lords of Shadow made its public debut at Gamescom 2009. Later that year, Mercury Steam showed the latest version of Lords of Shadow to Konami higher-ups, which included Metal Gear Solid overlord Hideo Kojima. Kojima loved it and asked the room, why isn't this Castlevania? Eventually, Kojima joined Lords of Shadow as a producer, and though he'd later leave Konami, Kojima is uniquely responsible for the continuation of Castlevania as we know it. Thanks for watching. Click the looper icon to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Plus, check out all this cool stuff we know you'll love too.